Thank you, Sandra, for coming to talk to me. What made you throw your hat into the ring?
You know, I think as we have moved through this pandemic, it's become really clear that people are struggling. The gaps in equity in our society have become really highlighted, as well as the fact that we're in a climate emergency. I think government needs to step up and do better for people and planet, and we need leadership that will prioritize these things and action on these things. And I don't believe we're getting that leadership or that action. I want to show up and step up and make sure that these things are prioritized.
What are you passionate about?
You know, I'm thinking about that and the work that I've done so far in my roles. Inclusion is really a big thing for me. I believe we're all connected. We're all better off when we're taking care of each other's wellness and our connection, our feeling of connection in community, and also people feeling like they are able to build a good life for themselves. All of my work has, with both my congregation and my work as a school trustee, has been centered on these pieces, especially wellness and feeling included in one's community. So whether that's work in terms of getting the sexual orientation and gender identity policy passed for the school district to ensure that that our students and staff and families feel included and have equal opportunities in our district, to working on reconciliation issues and anti-poverty issues with my congregation.
So I know you've been a passionate advocate for affordable housing, and you've spoken up about the housing crisis. Why do you think we find ourselves in the middle of a housing affordability crisis?
Well, there are a number of reasons why we find ourselves in the crisis right now, and it's going to require a number of different strategies to help get to a point where every Canadian has, and everybody in our community is able to afford quality, affordable housing, where we're not seeing people having to move out of their communities that maybe they've grown up in or that they work in order to find decent housing. Immediately, we have a rental shortage, and housing shortage in general. So we need to talk about supply of housing, both rental, non-market, co-op housing, also just supply of homes for purchase as well, because that's also driving prices up. So we need to tackle speculation. Like the NDP proposal to enhance the capital gains tax, for example, and the foreign buyers, implementing the 20% foreign buyers tax. Support for renters is an immediate concern, and I know that this is something that isn't going to be a long-term fix, but we know that people are struggling right now. So the $5,000 rental subsidy that's being proposed to help people in the short term, absolutely we need that to help people transition out of the pandemic and stay afloat and not have to be looking in desperation to move out of their communities. Also, the supply of affordable housing is really critical. My family and we rented privately a townhouse for 10 years, and we were always concerned about the possibility of the place being sold and having to move. We had a couple of scares with young children in school and in programs in the community that we would have to find something very quickly and move. Also, the rents were starting to get out of control, and we were finding it very hard to afford a market rent. So we've been a co-op now for 8 years. We would never look back and don't regret the decision at all. It took us 2 years to get off the waiting list, and I know the wait lists are long. I was going around for some signatures the other day, talking to people in a unit, and they had someone staying with them whose parents, they told us, are living in their van, and they themselves are living with friends while they're waiting to have their name come up to the top of a list for a co-op. Absolutely, this is doable in terms of the NDP's plan to build 500,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years. There's land that can be repurposed. The federal government has a role to play in that. And also we can motivate and support community groups. I think one of the issues is having big developers mostly involved in building rental and affordable housing, non-market housing. where profit is the bottom line. And I've seen developments through my work with the United Church. United Church has tried to build affordable housing, one here in Richmond. That project kept getting changed and derailed as it became obvious that the developer wasn't going to be making as much of a profit as they were hoping to. So in terms of providing resources, startup funds, long-term leases for community groups whose main priority is not the bottom line and making the most profit out of the development, whose main priority is to actually build affordable housing, and getting creative with partnerships. So not just with churches. We have a lot of school districts with a lot of land that may not be needing to be used long-term for other things. And I know in some districts they've actually had those conversations. So I think we need to be looking at what assets we have and how we can partner and get really creative about getting housing going.
So it's interesting, when I saw your co-op, I saw that plaque which says that it was funded by the federal government. And it seems that the federal government has pretty much given up on funding co-ops in the last 50 years or so.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to get more involved in that aspect with CMHC and with the Housing Co-op Federation to find out. I know a lot of leases have come due, and there've been some conversations, for example, around False Creek, about what would it look like to start building more co-ops. But there have been proposals for different models, which I think are in danger of moving us away from the values, the kind of community that we're wanting to create with co-ops, and what's so special about those kinds of models. And I think we need to be careful, but we need to be promoting it, finding ways to fund it, but making sure we don't lose the spirit of what the intention of co-ops were, both not just housing security and affordability, but creating diverse community. One of the things I love about living in this co-op is it's an extremely diverse community demographically, from all demographic perspectives. And it's just wonderful to have that representation of our community and be living in that representation.
So I see that you've been an outspoken champion for mental health.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what's that about?
Sure, absolutely. I've had friends and family members who've struggled with mental health. I myself have struggled with anxiety, and especially with regards to our youth, I think it's becoming epidemic, especially with anxiety to do with COVID, but also around climate change. I hear a lot from young people as I have those conversations that this is foremost in the front of their minds, and when it's not in the front of their minds, they're carrying that existential anxiety with them all the time. And so one of the reasons I ran for trustee was because I saw gaps in terms of helping students who were really struggling with their mental health, in terms of alternative programs and really disconnected supports. There were supports available, but they weren't really coordinated, and so I've been trying to work on that from that side of things. Also, in my work with my congregation, it's a very social justice focused congregation, and we are engaged with marginalized folks quite a bit. At our community breakfast, for example, in our coffee house, I'm having conversations with folks who aren't getting the support that they need, and talking about how we can better help with that. So in terms of universal access to mental health, but I think we need to take seriously the fact that we don't have enough supply of those services. We personally, as a family, have encountered huge wait lists in terms of accessing mental health services. Sorry, I had one other thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah. I think also when people feel a sense of isolation or alienation, or they don't feel like they belong in their community, that also is a huge contributor to poor mental health. And so we need to be addressing mental health also from an equity perspective and an inclusion perspective. We need to be taking, for example, the rise in racism that we see here in Richmond, but in everywhere, seriously, and we need to be letting people know that they're being supported, that this isn't going to be tolerated. That's not the kind of community we're building. then take active steps to address that. So, for example, I brought a motion to the Richmond School District to form an anti-racism working group, and specifically looking at systemic racism and where that is embedded in our practices and ethos, and challenging us as a district to listen to the experiences of folks in our school communities, and doing better and making change around that.
So you mentioned that addressing poverty is one big reason that you're running for office. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what that's about?
Sure, absolutely. So in my work, especially with my congregation and as a minister, I talk to a lot of people who, for a variety of reasons, are making a living wage. They're feeling a sense of hopelessness because they're trying to juggle between paying for their phone bill and paying the rent and paying for good groceries, for example. So that's, we're very aware of those challenges. I've met folks who are my age who have no teeth left because they were never able to afford to go to a dentist. And so a number of things that are very doable and that the NDP is committed to doing are, for example, pharmacare, and access to dental care for anyone who doesn't have benefits. I'd also hoping it would be to cover those with very minimal benefits, because some dental plans are extremely minimal. Eyeglasses, for example, many plans are very inadequate as well, even if you are lucky enough to have a plan. And these are essentials. These are things when people are worried about how to pay or only able to pay for one essential and not the other. They're always in that high anxiety about that and that stress. And it's really hard to, for example, look for a better job and attend interviews if you only have money for groceries and phone bill and not for getting an outfit to attend an interview, or for internet service to submit that resume online, for example.
So it's interesting you say that, because we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, mm-hmm. yet we have so much poverty. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an excellent question. I think it's a matter of priorities. Unfortunately, I think that people who are poor are unable to fund political campaigns, very frankly. And so they're not always given priority, especially in terms of policy promises during a campaign. I'm running with the NDP because the history of this party is to put people first, to put people's well-being first, to acknowledge that we're all connected, and that as a society we're better off when we're taking care of each other. When you help people out of poverty and help people live fulfilling lives, and they feel included in their communities, where they are supported in their well-being and they find opportunities to build a better life. A lot of the things we spend money on in terms of crime prevention, prison, programs to treat addiction, a lot of that is lessened because people are well and they're not desperate. And those are some of the problems we see when people are feeling hopeless and desperate and unsupported. I also think that I've seen in recent years that over time, different levels of government tend to pass the buck to another level to say it's really a provincial matter. That's really a city matter, the 10 cities or whatever it is. They've also tended to pass the responsibility, frankly, and to rely on nonprofits, churches and other groups to provide these services. And because the people working in those organizations care so much, are so committed to these values, they will not let the safety net fall completely. They'll do everything they can, even when it's funding year to year, putting in the grant applications year to year for programs that support people. They will not let the system completely fail. And government knows this. And they are happy to continue to pass the buck. So I'm not sure maybe it's time to have new leadership come in, a leadership that's committed to the social fabric and to ensuring that those supports are there for people. Not saying not to work with nonprofits and organizations, but to exercise leadership and not continue to pass the buck.
So one last question. If I were in the Richmond Centre riding, why would I vote for Sandra Nixon and the NDP?
Thanks. So not only do we need better leadership from the federal government in the big picture, we need better leadership, I believe, here in Richmond Centre. We've had an MP who's been in office since 2008 who does not have a record of speaking up or showing up for the people of Richmond. We deserve better, and I think that I've demonstrated in the work that I've been doing over the years for the various communities I'm involved in that I will speak up and show up, that I will listen, and that I'm interested in ensuring that we have the conversations that we need to, that together we set the important priorities, and then we get to work.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for taking the time out of your day, your busy day. I know
Thank you so
caught
much.
you while you were still doing some campaigning, but thanks again.
Absolutely. Between the planes and the crows, we made it through. So thank you.
Thank you so much.